In a world where anything is possible, in a world where the normal and the paranormal reside, Almost Unbelievable brings to you the stories you want to hear, but fear to hear. Join us in the pit. You have joined the very first Almost Unbelievable live podcast with Catz and Ranty. I'm Ranty. Are you there, Catz?
I am here, and a Merry Christmas to you. How are you doing?
Merry Christmas.
It's very festive. Very festive. It's a festive pit today.
It is, and we've got a lot of stories to talk through, to be fair. We've got a load of stories, and I hope everyone's going to find these interesting, because some of them pertain to me, but some of them also pertain to other people, and I am sure you've got your own little take on what actually might be happening in there, Catz. I know that you like to try and de-science these, so let's see how that works out today. So, tell us a little bit, how's your week been?
My week has been excellent. It's a lot of family time. We're all isolating because of positive tests and whatnot. So it's been great to spend some time with the family. And I'm not totally sick of them yet. So how's that?
That sounds good. Well, let's do a first shout out to our very, very first commenter in the chat. We have Sir Little Wolf, who says, "Hello, bipeds." Hello to you.
Well, Merry Christmas, Sir Little Wolf. Maybe he could give his opinion on the little Christmas quiz I'm about to give you, Ranty. Are you ready for a almost unbelievable paranormal Christmas quiz?
Go on then, hit me with it.
Right. So I'm going to read you 3, maybe 4 ghost stories. Some of them are ghost stories that are actually documented in history that real people in professional positions are reported to have seen, and some are going to be made up by me. And at the end of the little ghost story, I want you to tell me if I've made them up or not. And I have written them all down, so I'm going to read them off the paper, so you can't tell whether I'm just making them up on the fly or not. Are you ready?
Go on then, hit me with it.
Okay, the first one is about the Ghost of Alcatraz. Now, I don't even know, but Alcatraz became a very notorious federal prison in 1934. It's housed criminals such as Al Capone, up until when it was shut down in 1963, and it was obviously a subject of that fantastic film. But ever since it was created, and even to today, visitors and prisoners reported hearing screams, clanging of metal doors and keys, the sounds of voices within the walls when it should be quiet, and most famously, one of the wardens there, James Johnson, held a Christmas Day party at his residence for the staff at the prison. So they were all in the prison, and they were all having the Christmas dinner, and they were all having a great time. And then apparently they all reported, all the prison wardens there, that the temperature just absolutely plummeted. And when they were looking around trying to figure out what was wrong with the heating, a man who none of them knew just appeared in the middle of the room. A grey man with a moustache who didn't say a word. He just looked at them in the eyes, one by one by one, and then in front of them all just disappeared. And then the room started heating up again. And the staff were so scared that they left and the Christmas party ended. Now, have I made that story up? Or do those wardens claim that happened?
Oh, right. Now that's you see, the Alcatraz connection, it's quite possible. Looked at them one by one, terrified the heat man. I think all in all, I would like it to be true, but I've never heard of it before, so I'm gonna say that it isn't true.
Well, actually, I'd never heard of it before I started researching for this. But no, the warden James Johnson was a real person. And if you scour over the internet, you'll find his account of this story and the account of some of his fellow wardens. And they all did say that actually happened. So, yeah, now whether it did happen or not, I don't know. But it's documented as them claiming so.
Wow. Well, to be fair, Sir Little Wolf said it was true. I didn't think it would be that easy to say, hey, there's ghosts. Come on, if you're at a Christmas party and you see something like that, how can you deny? How can you deny something like that, Catz? I mean, how is science going to explain that?
Well, listen, if I was at a Christmas party and the temperature all dropped around me and a mysterious figure just appeared in front of me and looked me in the eye and then disappeared, then I wouldn't be denying that. You know, I think it's a case of seeing is believing. And if I saw something like that, excuse me, I would not be denying it at all.
Well, right. So if there's any ghost out there that want to go and do a haunting this Christmas, you know where to go.
Yeah. To me, I'll be the Scrooge for the year, the miserable guy. I am quite miserable at the minute, I'll be honest. So let's come over and make me change my ways. Okay, story number 2. Roos Hall in Suffolk. Now, Roos Hall in Suffolk, whether you've heard of it or not, lays claim to being the most haunted house in England. Outside, it has a gruesome hanging tree. It was a tree, basically, that was planted outside just with the sole purpose of hanging criminals on it, so the people of Roos Hall could watch it without having to leave their house. Now, to make things worse, inside one of the building's cupboards, there is said to be the mark of a devil's cloven hoof print imprinted into the wood. So basically, wherever the wardrobe was made and the wood was kind of cut, they found that imprint and then built a wardrobe and took it to the hall. Now, legend has it that ever since that wardrobe was placed into Roos Hall, that guests, and only since it was placed there, guests who've been claim to see headless horsemen clattering down the driveway on 4 black horses pulling a phantom coach. Have I made that up? Or?
Right, have you made that one up? Oh dear me. I didn't do so well on the first one, so I think I have to get this one right. So, again, I'm going to have to say I don't believe it. And the only reason I'm going to say that is because when you turned around and said that they made this the gallows so that all the residents could watch and put it in that location, that to me didn't make any sense. It's like, why would you just be caring about where you're going to place the gallows for the watchers to see it? Didn't make any sense to me. So I'm going to say no, not true.
And I would have agreed if I hadn't researched that one myself. And that Roos Hall is actually a place, and it is one of the most haunted.
Oh come on! Is that really?
That is one of the stories.
I'm nil from 2 now. I'm nil from 2. Is there another one? Can I redeem myself?
This is the last one.
Right. I have to get this right.
James Herschel was an autopsy. I was going to say an autopsy carrier out. What's the technical term for an autopsy carrier out?
Mortician.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, it was one of those guys who does autopsies. One Christmas Eve, he was sent to work for some in a morgue that he'd never worked in before. This morgue, the people who normally work there had been given the Christmas holidays, and he kind of filled in. He was doing some kind of like locum work, which is like supply teaching for doctors and morticians essentially. And he walked in, and he was warned that this was one of the most spooky, haunted morgues that he'll ever see, and he was warned to keep an eye out, and especially at Christmas Eve, that's when things started to get a little bit freaky. Now, he'd obviously spent a lot of time working in a morgue, given the fact that he carried out autopsies, so he didn't care about that at all. But from the minute he walked into the morgue, he said it felt colder than any other morgue he'd been in, and he had this sense that somebody was watching him all night. Now, he went for his dinner, and when he came back from his dinner, there was a note on the desk, and that note on the desk said, "Nice to meet you. I will see you later." And he thought nothing of it. He looked around and he thought, this is very, very strange, very odd. There's nobody else in the morgue. Where's this note come from? It must be the security guard playing tricks on me, etc. Anyway, he went home, and that was that. He woke up the next morning, Christmas morning, and when he walked into the kitchen, he found a glass that had been filled with what looked like blood on his kitchen table and tipped upside down, and his kitchen table was covered in blood, which obviously freaked him out massively. He then ran into the hallway to find the phone, because we're going back about 30 years here before mobile phones. He ran into the hallway to find the phone so we could call the police and say there's been an intruder. And just above the phone, marked in blood, as if someone had put the finger in the blood and written a message on the wall. The message said, "Told you I'd see you again."
Eee, that's creepy. Yeah, there's a little too much blood in that for me, if I'm honest. So I'm going to have to say, I hope I'm going to get this one right, that one is definitely not true.
Yes, that one I made up.
Yes!
On the fly as well, actually, because I'd lost a piece of paper with my actual made-up story. I was looking around at my desk for it. So that one I made up on the fly. So that's how my mind works. So yeah, well done. Maybe later on we'll give you a chance to level things up.
Yeah, sounds good to me. I mean, you made that on the fly? Where is your head at, my friend?
I told you, it's been a stressful week.
It would seem so.
So today, for people who are new to the podcast, do you just want to tell people the format of the podcast and what we usually do?
Okay, yeah. So essentially, I am a lot more open to this than Catz here. Catz likes to try and find a scientific reason as to why people may have experienced what they think is a ghost or a encounter with something. I, on the other hand, am very open to all these things. A lot of things have happened to me, which we might talk about in a minute. A lot of things have happened to me personally, so I'm very, like I say, I'm very in tune with this kind of thing. So I'm a little more open to this. Catz would like to try and, for a better word, debunk, but maybe just sort of like science it. And yeah, so that's what he does. And the format is that we'll bring guests on to tell a story, and we will let them say it from start to finish, and it gives them a platform to come on and tell us what they've experienced. I love listening to that, and I think over time, when we've got quite a backlog, a big history of these kind of things, we'll be able to perhaps put them in little folders, the demon stories or the UFO stories. They can all go into a little package together, and we can always look back on these and say, well, there is a big collection here of people that all say they saw a particular ghost or a particular, they've all got something in common with each other. And I'm hoping that over time we may be able to convince a few people, a few doubters out there, maybe Catz here, that these things are potentially real. What about you, Catz? How would you view it?
No, I think you've summed that up really well. That I'm just fascinated by stories like this, and I always have. I've always, as I've grown up listening to, when I was a kid, reading ghost stories and reading about UFOs and reading, about all sorts of crazy out there things. And then as I grew up and I became a bit more sciencey, I kind of discarded them as anything that I'd take seriously. But I maintained my fascination with the stories and how entertaining they are. So I suppose you could say that I'm in this to wait for a story that I think, wow, that is incredible. I can't find a scientific explanation for this. That would be amazing, wouldn't it? To actually have that ghost just appear in front of you and you see it with your own eyes. That would be fantastic. So I'm hugely entertained by it. I'm really looking forward to it. Looking forward to doing loads and loads of these, and hopefully I'll get that story that might change my mind one day. We'll see. And
the good thing is, we don't just get the stories. If people actually have some kind of videotape photography or footage or anything like that can embellish the story to say, hey, I have this, look, I saw a UFO and I filmed it on camera, and that would be ideal, or a ghost or something like that. And we do actually have that. There is actually the first show that we ever did, which was the demon one, the shadow demon. The lady kindly presented a video for us to watch where you actually see this, for a better word, shadow kind of entity pass through the screen while she's actually singing, and that's on our Patreon. So if anyone wants to go and see that, knock yourself out. But this is all what it's all about. It's actually getting your hands on these things, and if there's any ghosts out there that want to pay Catz a little visit over this Christmas period, I don't think he'd be averse to that. He's just said he wants to see a ghost appear in front of him, so I'm up for that.
So, I did actually go on a ghost hunt once. I took some kids to, because I'm a science teacher as a profession, I took some kids to a haunted house to try and improve their investigative skills. And we took data logging equipment and cameras and temperature measurements, and we had it all hooked up. And we just spent the night all walking around researching this old haunted building. It was quite interesting. But but I'll save that maybe for another podcast. Talk about the results there. Who is today's guest, Ranty?
Well, today's guest, funnily enough, is me, actually. I have, like I said, quite a few different stories, and the reason that you and I probably are going to get on very well doing this is because when people tell us about a certain story, I can somewhat relate to that because I have a lot of stories to tell because these things did actually happen to me. So I've told you a few of these, Catz. Do you want to bring one up and let's have a chat about it? Let's see where we go with this.
Okay, well, let's go in the order that you. I don't want to spoil the story by giving it away. So you choose the one you want to start with. I will put myself on mute. We'll all listen. If anybody is in the chat and wants to ask Ranty a question about the story, please do, and I'll read that. Tag me in. I'm on the Conspiracy Catz account at the minute. Tag me in on that, and I'll ask Ranty the question when his story is finished, and then I'll let you know what I think of it. So you choose the question, the story, and I'm going on mute now.
Okay.
Off you go.
Right, fair enough. Well, in the meantime, I'm just going to say a few hellos to some of the people that are in. So we've got Sir Little Wolf that's in. We have R Winge, Dark Steve. We also have Andy H, and Dark Steve, with Conspiracy Catz obviously in there moderating. So, right, first story. So I'm going to go from the youngest age that I can recall. So and this is a story I have told before. So, I was a young child. I would have been, by the age that this all ended, I would have been about the age of between 5 and 6. So let's say 5 3/4, right? Because that's what kids do. So I'm 5 3/4, but this thing started to happen to me when I was about 2 or 3 years of age. So for quite a long time, I would, when I went to bed, have a conversation or what they would call childhood friend. So my mum and my father and my sister or whoever was around the house at that particular time would hear me in the bedroom talking, and they just thought it was a childhood friend. You know, I don't know why they call it a childhood friend. Maybe they think you're some kind of nutter or something. But my recollection is of seeing a lumberjack. Now then, there's a lumberjack with an axe. Now, I'd never seen a lumberjack in my entire life. I didn't know what one was. But, you know, when I got a little bit older, I recognised this was the name for it. I used to just call him the man in the wardrobe, but he was a lumberjack. He had an axe, he had lumberjack gear on, he was about mid-60s, something like that, and he lived in the wardrobe. Now, the wardrobe was an old wardrobe, and Brenda, no, it is not pre-recorded, this is live. So, the man in the wardrobe used to live in this oak wardrobe, and come out, talk to me, we'd have a conversation, I'd fall asleep. That would be it till the following day. And this went on for, like I say, a couple of years. Just 1 second whilst that phone stops ringing.
Well, while Ranty's sorting his phone out, just welcome Brenda to the chat. Who else has just appeared? Andy H as well. Hope I pronounced that right. And just remember, if you do want to ask Ranty a question about these stories before I give my opinion on it, then please feel free to just tag me in. I'm on the Conspiracy Catz account, and I'll put that question to him as soon as he's finished with the story. But it sounds either as though he's sorted the phone out or he is
ready to go.
He's ready to go.
I'm ready to go. So, the man in the wardrobe. So, I was about, like I say, 5 3/4, and I'd come home from school, and my father was in the back garden and he was having a bonfire, and what he'd done is he'd actually got a new wardrobe for me. So he'd bought one of these like MFI things, just flimsy wardrobe things that was just rubbish anyway, and that was, you know, back in those days, new is better, but to be honest, the old wardrobe was better. Anyway, this new wardrobe was in, the old wardrobe was out. The oak wardrobe was actually all broken up and on the bonfire getting burned. And from that moment on, the lumberjack never returned. I lost my childhood friend, and he was gone. Your turn, Catz.
Wow. Well, that's that's a story and a half. Let's see if anyone in the chat has got a question they want to ask you before I give my sort of opinion on that. Let's have a look. A lot of people are saying Merry Christmas. Nobody's got a question. So give them 10 seconds and then I will dive in. Okay, I do have one or two questions with you
Okay,
before
go on.
I give my opinion. This lumberjack, obviously you spoke to him, you got a good look at him, you know, you obviously would recognize his features, etc. Did he have a solid physical presence?
Yes, yeah, very solid physical presence. I would say, you know, recalling what he looked like, he was mid-60s, he had a white beard. It wasn't very long. It was kind of more stubble than beard, maybe a centimetre long, let's say that. And he was, you know, he wasn't a slim guy. You know, he was probably around about 15 or 16 stone. And yeah, I mean, he had a big axe. He was a hefty guy, and he was dressed in lumberjack gear. That's the best way I can describe it.
Now, how can I put this? So obviously, without myself being there, it is difficult. But what I will do is I'll introduce you to a guy called Lev Vygotsky. Now, Lev Vygotsky is a psychologist who works in the field of cognitive development in children. And he's got some very strong evidence to suggest that the creation of an imaginary friend has a very, very useful, it plays a very, very useful part in the cognitive development of children. It actually helps them learn how to interact, practice how to interact, and it helps them process information because as a child you're taking on a lot of information, a lot of it's foreign to you, and somehow, if we have a look at his papers, which it's all above my head, he claims that the invention of a childhood sort of imaginary friend is a natural part of our cognitive development. Now, I have spoken to you before on another podcast about somebody called Elizabeth Loftus. Now, Elizabeth Loftus also looks at memory and how when we remember an event, our memory becomes malleable, and while we are remembering it, details can be changed. And when we actually remember something, if we look at Donna Bridges' work as well, she's shown that when we remember something, we're actually remembering the last time we remembered it, not the original event itself. So if that memory does become malleable and there's some sort of suggestion, or we emphasize a little bit too much significance on one part of the story, the next time we remember it, we'll remember that part as being more significant than it was. And our memories can change, and we can be totally unaware of it, and we can absolutely believe that believe in a memory that didn't exist. In fact, Elizabeth Loftus has a lot of research showing that she can implant memories into people who are willing to be part of our program. She can create a memory, ask them to talk about something, so she can suggest detail to them and actually force them to have false memories that she's got written in an envelope that she then gives them and says, listen, you know, I've implanted this memory in you. So, I mean, I obviously wasn't there, but I would be interested in, if you did look at Lev Vygotsky's, and I don't ask me to spell that, if you looked at his research, see what you'd think. But the physical presence, did he ever move anything?
No, he always just stood at the bottom of the bed. So my bed was underneath the window, but pressed against the back wall kind of thing, and there was probably around about 3 foot of gap before the wardrobe, which was on the opposing wall, and he would just stand outside of his wardrobe and talk to me at the bottom of the bed. So he would be at the bottom of the bed, I would be in bed, and whatever we said, it's lost to the wind for me because I can't remember, it was a very long time ago. But the visual visual memory of what I saw is still there. The story, the fact that my parents still recalled this happening, recalled the times that they would come upstairs to use the toilet and they would hear me talking to somebody. That, you know, I mean, for me at least anyway, that's more evidence that what I saw was an actual real thing. But, you know, I mean, I can still see it, you can't see it, and whether science can answer that, I don't know. For me personally, it was definitely a ghost, and I guess until you've seen it, you just never know, do you?
Well, I think it was a great story, and I love the idea of delving a little bit more into imaginary friends and finding people who've had imaginary friends, and maybe imaginary friends that have been shared with other children? Are there people out there who've had the same imaginary friend and interacted with them at the same time? I'd be interested to see what their stories are. So,
well,
I think I've kind of gone.
Funny you should say that, because one of the stories that I'm going to be talking about later is exactly about that. It's about a man and a woman, now brother and sister, that had encounters with the same type of fairies when they were children. So.
Let's have a look at some questions from the chat for now. Brenda has asked similar question, I think, to what I said. Maybe you've answered it, but she did say, did this apparition ever interact with things like pick up objects, etc.?
No, like I said, he was just a apparition at the bottom of the bed, so he never physically interacted. What can I say? At least I don't recall that anyway, but my recollection of it was that he was just at the bottom of the bed. I was pretty young at the time.
Sir Little Wolf says it adds to the Mandela effect too, so I think he's probably talking about my citation of Elizabeth Loftus and how memories become malleable and can change over time with that. But I don't think we have any other questions from the chat. So
okay,
I will leave it there. Normally what we do is we rank the stories. In fact, should we tell them how the stories rank? Do you want to tell them what we normally say?
Yeah, so obviously the show is called Almost Unbelievable, and obviously we have different ways of deciding what our personal opinion was of the story. So you would have unbelievable, which would be we just don't believe that. Almost unbelievable, which is, it's on the cusp of being unbelievable, but there's a small chance of it being believable. Obviously then you've got almost believable, which is obviously more believable than unbelievable, and then finally we've got believable. So there's 4 categories that we kind of try to sort of like weigh up and say on what kind of story we would give them. For me personally, I'm going to say my story was believable.
I hope you would, given the fact that it's your story. I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to save until the end of your 4 stories. I'm going to save my verdict for then, if that's okay.
That's fine. Right, okay.
Because it's going to be the same verdict for all of them, I think. Possibly. So
we'll
see.
We'll see, right, okay, right. Happy days then, right. Story number two. So, let's fast forward a couple of years. So, back when I was a child, I could do something called astral projection. And I would say that the last time I was able to do something like that was when I was about 15 years of age. But up until that point, I would regularly, what I recall as doing is leaving the body, and you would have these feelings, you would have this, how would I explain it? You would be lying in your bed, you would concentrate on trying to project yourself out of the body, and sometimes you could do it, sometimes you couldn't. And when you were actually getting the feeling that you could actually do it, you would feel a little bit lightheaded, you'd start to feel like you were falling backwards, then you would feel your stomach being lifted up, and eventually you would just pop out of your body. And that's how I recall doing my astral projection as a child. What happened, my Uncle Clifton had passed away in a car accident, and my mother was really devastated at this. And she knew that I could do astral projection, so she asked me, maybe a few weeks after he'd passed, if you do any kind of astral projection and you happen to go to, she said heaven, I'm not going to say it's heaven, but this is what she told me, would you go to heaven? And if you see him, will you ask him these 3 questions? So she gave me a task, she tasked me with doing something. Now I was about, I'd say, it was between 7 and 8, so I was probably just turned 8, so I had been practicing to leave the body, and I had a destination to go to, and this took about 3 weeks to do this. But when I actually left my body, I went through this tunnel, and the tunnel was all multicolored. So it was every kind of color you could think of except for black. It was all just fancy colors. It was like looking through a kaleidoscope kind of thing. And I'm going down this tunnel, and I'm going to give you a speed here because it's important to try, and if I'm going to equate speeds to the full story, especially on the return journey, we're going to try and sort of like come up with a speed. Now, let's say that I was traveling at 1,000 miles an hour. So this is my speed going up. through this tunnel, 1,000 miles an hour. So I'm going at 1,000 miles an hour through this tunnel, and as I get towards the end of the tunnel, I could see this very bright white light popped out of the end of the tunnel, and I am standing on some clouds, all white. And in the distance, what seemed like a few hundred meters away, was a ginormous building with a big archway, and it was all white too. In fact, everything was just white up there. It was crazy. There was no colour or anything. So I'm looking at this building, and I'm looking at the archway, and I had the sensation that I need to get to the archway, but before I could even recall walking any kind of distance, I just sort of ended up at the archway. So I was just there, right? So I'm in the archway, and I can look left, I can look right, and all on the floor, left and right, there was bodies, people that were alive. You know, they weren't dead, but they had these white shawls over them, you know, blankets up to the neck. And for whatever reason, I looked left, I looked right, and I got the impression that I needed to go right. So I turned right, I walked down, or floated, glided down part way, halfway, let's say, and on the left-hand side, I just knew that this is where I needed to stop. So I stopped there, and I looked down, and there was my Uncle Clifton. Now, it's a weird thing, because my relationship with my Uncle Clifton wasn't the best. I was actually quite terrified of him, to be honest, if I'm truthful. So we didn't have you know, I mean, it's like it was my will to want to go and have a chat with him, because I was a bit scared of him, in all truthfulness. Not that he ever did anything to make me scared, I was just scared of him. It's just the way it was. Anyway, I remembered the 3 questions that my mother had asked me to ask him, so I asked him these 3 questions, and he gave me the answers, whatever they were at the time. And as soon as I heard the third answer to the 3rd question, it felt like somebody had grabbed my ankles. So really tightly, right on the ankles, and then yanked me down. Now, if I was travelling at 1,000 miles an hour up through the tunnel, I was now travelling at 100,000 miles an hour going down, so 100 times faster, and the noise was incredible. I mean, this wind that was going through my ears, it was so loud, I felt like my ears were going to pop. I couldn't open my eyes, I was going that fast. It felt like if I opened my eyes, my eyeballs would pop out of my head. So I didn't see anything, it was all black. My stomach felt like it was up in my chest, you know, I mean, like you're on a Big Dipper, but 100 times worse than that. And I was being pulled down with this incredible, like I say, this noise that was ringing through my ears. So I just wanted it to stop. I hate it. Whatever I was going through at that moment in time lasted probably about 10 seconds, maybe more, maybe 15 seconds. But it was horrible. I couldn't breathe. I mean, it was just horrible, this force that I was being pulled down with. And I hit my bed. I remember hitting my bed, and as soon as I hit the bed, like that, I ping opened my eyes, and I realised that I was about 3 foot off the bed. And I'd hit the bed, bounced up, because I could feel myself still going up, and then I landed back down on the bed again. So whatever had happened, the physical re-entry of my spirit into my body kind of forced this jump off the bed. You know, I mean, it hit the bed and jumped up, and I woke up halfway up the bed, you know, 2 or 3 foot off the air. And of course, the first thing I did was run into my mum's room around about, I don't know, let's say 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever time, and tell her what had happened. Gave her the questions and the answer, told her the questions, gave the answers that Clifton had gave, and that's the story.
Wow. Well, before I speak about that, let's see what the chat have got to say. Are there any questions? Just if you tag me into the chat, we'll see if there are any questions I can give you, take from you and give to Ranty. Can I just clarify 1 or 2 things? These questions that you had the questions and answers to, is there any way that you could have known the answers to these questions before the astral projection?
Without remembering what the questions were, that's the thing, you see. I mean, I was only about 8 years of age. I recalled the questions, obviously, at the time. And do I recall them now? No. Do I think they were very hard questions to answer? Probably not. I mean, I wouldn't imagine it was something like... It doesn't ring a bell that it was something like, oh, can you tell us the password to your Filofax or whatever it would have been back then. So I mean, it wasn't something like that that you could do. Oh yeah, the Filofax number's this. But so it wasn't that. I think it was just it was just roundabout questions about a roundabout thing. Nothing that only he would have known. I guess in some way I could have implanted some kind of response, if I'm being truthful.
Now, difficult. See, I'll tell you a story, and then we'll see how closely mine matches yours, and then I'll ask your opinion on it. When I was a child, and I don't do this anymore, my brain's obviously developed in a different way, but I used to lucid dream. Now, for anyone who's not sure of what a lucid dream is, or a fully lucid dream, which is what I used to do, it's a dream where when you are dreaming, you are totally aware that you are dreaming. And because you're totally aware, you can essentially do whatever you want. So that was quite a regular occurrence for me. I probably had 8 to 10 of those a year, where I would have a dream, and I would know I was dreaming, and if I wanted to fly like Superman, I could fly like Superman. If I wanted to go to McDonald's, because as a kid, everyone wants McDonald's, that's what I'd do. And I could interact with the surroundings, but I couldn't control the surroundings. So I couldn't control what other people were going to say to me. I couldn't control what other people were going to do to me, but I could fully control my actions. I could give myself superpowers, or I could, fly into space. I did all sorts of stuff. I got on a magic carpet once and flew around the world when I was a kid. And to me, it was very, very real. Now that I'm older, I can't have those kind of dreams anymore. Obviously, as I've changed, my brain has developed, and whatever the psychology behind those dreams are, I can't have them. But I do remember them and how fun they were and how fantastic they were. And I have gone onto Google and looked at lucid dreaming. Now, and how you can train yourself to have these lucid dreams. And one of those methods is you could induce through almost like a form of meditation or repetition, little rituals that you have throughout the day to almost check that you're awake, if you like. And the idea is that they become so ingrained that when you go to sleep, if you find yourself carrying out these little repetitions, that will spark something in your brain to let you know, oh my God, I am awake and I'm having a dream. But anyway, they felt extremely, extremely real to me. What are the possibilities that this astral projection was just a fully lucid dream, and because you were so young, you couldn't tell the difference?
Oh, well, here's the thing. So, obviously, my mum passed away recently, and we had the funeral this week, and the neighbours growing up actually turned up to the funeral. So we had Wendy, we had Amanda, and we had Shirley, and they 3 turned up, and they were our next door neighbours. Now, funny, we got talking about this astral projection. Turns out that they could do it too. So the fact that they could do it, so the fact that they could do it was, to me at least, maybe indicative that there's something in the area. Now, they told me that the area where we used to grow up, there was, it was, from their research, they found that it was a very old part of Blackpool that had been used before, there'd been settlements there from hundreds of years ago. Something that I didn't know, actually. And my father, when we were children, went into the back garden, and he was just doing his little digging in the back garden, digging here and digging there, and he unearthed a old Roman, I think it was Roman at least, sword. So it was one of these short swords, no handle on it, but it was just the actual blade of it. And they still have that because my dad gave it to the next door neighbours, and they put it in the shed, and they said, oh yeah, it's still there. So that was dug up in our back garden. So maybe there's something going on with the area. Maybe there's some kind of maybe it's some kind of ley line or something like that that allows you to do that, because since I moved out of that house, I've not been able to do it. So, and because they did it as children as well, until the mid-teens, and then when they moved out, they've not been able to do it either. So maybe there's a connection with the area.
Possibly. What age were you when you moved out? And were your friends, were they same age as you? Wendy was 1 year older, Amanda was a year younger, and Shirley still lives there. So
I moved out when I was 19. So I recall probably the last age of being able to do this was about 15. And yeah, they report a similar thing. So whether or not it is something to happen with just children, like you say, it happened to you, I can't say for sure one way or the other. But I do recall being able to actually put myself in this kind of trance to actually accomplish this art of flying. And I recall this one time when I left the body, I actually went to fly through the window of the bedroom window, the first time I ever tried to fly through the window, and I put my hands out because I thought I was scared of hitting the glass, and then ended up back in my body immediately because I went to fly through the window, I was like, no, right, back in your body. And yeah, there we go, that's what I recall.
Right. Well, so there we go. Let's see what the chat are making of it. No questions yet from the chat, though Andy each does mention sleep I'll start again. Sleep paralysis is an horrendous experience. I know that you said on one of those experiences you had, you couldn't breathe hardly, etc., which is certainly a sign of sleep paralysis. That's a word I need to teach myself how to say, Ranty. That's 3 times I've got it wrong.
All right.
Again, if anyone's listening and has got a story about astral projection or a view about, lucid dreaming, I know a lot of people out there now are making money from selling apps and writing books and teaching people how to lucid dream, which is something that I 100% believe in, because as a child, like I said, it was a very, very regular occurrence to me to happen. It was great. It was like being the best virtual reality game you could possibly be in. So if anybody's got any experience in those areas, then get in touch. We'd love to have you on and talk about it. So
you can tell me what you think of that at the end, I suppose. Then
I will tell you what I think I've probably given away what I think it may have been with the line of questioning, but I'll give you my ranking at the end.
Okay.
Go on.
Well, I'm going to say that it was almost believable. I'm not going to go full believable on this, but I recall it very strongly as a child. So for me, well, actually, no, I'm going to change that, because I recall going through that tunnel and I recall being pulled down, and I don't believe personally the fact that I remember waking up and I was about 3 foot off the bed, and I remember falling back down again and hitting it after I entered my body. I just distinctly remember that, and I can't say that was a sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis wouldn't have you bouncing off the bed, so I'm going to change that now, and I'm going to go back to just being believable.
Okay. Well, before we go on to the next story, for those who've just come into the chat, we started off the stream by me quizzing Ranty with some ghost stories, some seasonal ghost stories, some that are actually documented by people in newspapers and even in history books in some cases. And Ranty had to guess whether these stories were true, that were documented, or whether I'd made them up. And currently it's 2-1 to me. Ranty, before we give you your next story, do you fancy seeing if you can level the playing field if I give you another one?
I'm ready for it. Go on, hit me with it.
Okay, this one is called The Haunted Dining Room at the Crescent Hotel. All right, well, that's what I'm calling it. The Crescent Hotel is a hotel in a place called Eureka, or Eureka Springs in Arkansas. It was built in the 1800s and is famous in the area for harboring many ghosts who seem to become more and more active during Christmas. Now, one Christmas, some staff members who were due to be waiting at a party came in, and they come in to set the party room up. And when they went into the party room, they saw the party was in full, what's the word? It was in full flow, the party. It had already started. And it appeared to be a period party. Everyone was dressed in old 1800s clothes. And it was being worked by other staff who were serving drinks and food. And they got a bit confused because they thought, well, we're supposed to be working this party. We've been given the wrong start time, and there's other staff here. So they went back to the manager and said, were we not booked down to be working today? Should we go home or what? And the manager said, yeah, the party starts in 3 hours. You need to get in there and sort the room out. And then when they went back into the room, it was empty, but the Christmas tree had moved. And there was no knowledge of, other than these 3 staff, of anybody ever being in that room on that Christmas Eve night.
Right.
Believable or unbelievable?
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of cheat here, because I do remember earlier when you said that you made one on the fly, but you also had one ready to go, which I'm going to say, just based on that simple fact, not because of the story, so I am kind of cheating here. I'm going to say it's not true, just because you couldn't find the not true story from before. No other reason. I don't have any other reason to say anything other than that.
Okay, well, you have leveled it. It is 2-2.
Woohoo!
I did base this on a story that was true, and I'll read you a story that was documented. And the story it goes like this. The Crescent Hotel in Eureka Springs was built in 1886 and is rumoured to harbour numerous ghosts who seem to be especially playful during the holidays. One Christmas, the staff came down to set up the dining room, only to find the Christmas tree had moved from one side of the room to the other. Another year, all the menus in the dining room had been scattered all around the room, and other visitors have reported seeing ghostly dancers clad in Victorian-era clothing whirling around the deserted dance floor. So I kind of took that story and hammed it up, obviously too much, because you spotted that I'd falsified it, so well done.
Yeah, well, 2 each, that can't be bad. Let's hope I can get the victory in this, because I definitely want it. So anybody that's listening, if you can tap quickly the next time Catz brings something up and you think that it's a true story, let me know in the chat, because I definitely need to win this. Right, my next story is going to be, and this didn't happen to me. Well, it did. In a way, it happened to me. I was part of it, but it happened more to my mother. So I would have been, let me think. I have to get an age now. So I'm going to say that I was about 14 years of age, right? I think that was about 13 or 14 years of age. And it was a Sunday. My father was home and we had put the chicken in. We got everything ready for the Sunday dinner. The only thing we needed to get was potatoes, right? And my mum said, "Oh, I'll walk to the shop and get potatoes." Well, to walk to the shop and back again would take about let's say a 20-minute round journey. So 10 minutes there, so 8 minutes there, 8 minutes back, and 4 minutes in the shop. So 20 minutes, nothing more, nothing less. So she left at 11 o'clock in the morning to go and get some roasties, well, some potatoes. We always had Sunday dinner at 1 o'clock, or between 1 and 1:30. So the fact that we had no potatoes, meant that she had to go at about 11 o'clock, get back, peel them, put them in the oven. It did go well with the dinner. So she left at 11 o'clock, and it got to about 12 o'clock. And at this point, we're starting to worry, well, where is she? It's only down the bloody road. How long does it take to go and get potatoes? So I walked out, and I'm just pacing up and down, outside in the front, just waiting. And I saw the number 6 bus went by. So the number 6 bus went by our house. Now, I remember being drawn to the front of this bus because something caught my eye. And there was this black figure. Now, I'm not going to say that I actually saw my mum's face on this black figure, but I got the impression, for whatever reason, that it was my mum. I don't know why, I just got the impression that it was my mum. And this thing, or whatever it was waving like nobody's business. Both arms giving it whatever. Wave, wave, wave. I mean, that's what caught my eye. And then when I focused on this and I saw this and I could see that this black figure just wave, 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 wave. And I just thought, that's my mum. Huh. Right, okay. So the bus stop was about, let's say, 70 metres further on. Down, just a little around the corner. So, of course, I go down to the bus stop. So I sort of went running-ish towards the bus stop, saw that the bus didn't stop there, right? And I thought, that's odd, because she was getting off the bus. She was at the front of the bus, ready to get off like you would do back then. You stood at the front of the bus pulled over, she'd have got off. It didn't. Nobody got off, the bus carried on. And fortunately, there's just one bus stop left, which is the terminus. So the bus that should have stopped at that bus stop, it didn't. And then what it had to do is it had to go around this square. So it had to go around the square. So it had to go up a bit further, turn left, go a couple of 100 meters, and then come back down again and park up at the bus stop at the terminus. And I, back then, was an athlete. I was very fast at running, and I instinctively thought I need to run round to the terminus to meet my mum there, because I saw the figure. Ran around, and I got there before the bus got there. And The bus pulled up. Nobody got off. I said to the guy, where's the woman that was at the front of the bus? The one that was waving like a lunatic just a couple of stops ago. He said there was nobody there. I said there was. I saw it. He said there's nobody been on the bus since they got off at Leighton Institute. That's the last place that somebody got off. Nobody's been on the bus. I said, right, okay. So I came home, told my dad and my sister what had happened, and time ticks on. So 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, right? So 9 hours after my mum left to go out and get some potatoes that would have only taken a 20-minute journey, she came back and she walked in the front door. And of course we all went, where have you been? Where have you been? And she's like, what? What are you doing? Why are you like this? What are you on about? I says, well, you've been gone 9 hours. She couldn't believe that she'd been gone for 9 hours. She had no idea she'd been gone for 9 hours. And she said, well, it's weird that you should say that, because when I walked into the shop, I remember it being light. And when I walked out of the shop, I remember it being dark, but I didn't recall anything. I didn't think anything of that. It didn't register until you just told me that I'd been gone for 9 hours. So she had been gone for 9 hours, and during that journey, she had no recollection. She just thought she had walked down to the shop, got the potatoes, and walked home. That's her recollection of what happened. My recollection is of her being gone for 9 hours, as is everybody else's, and the fact that I saw this quote-unquote black figure waving vigorously at me on the bus. So there's the story, and that definitely happened.
Okay, now that's a challenge, that one, isn't it? That is a challenge, because we've got a number of different things to talk about there. We have the complete loss of time experienced by your mother, those 9 hours. We have your experience during that time of seeing your mum, and then we have the bus driver who didn't see your mum. So if I was going to take a wild stab in the dark, this is where I would start. But obviously this is only a guess because I wasn't there and you were. But I would be thinking about the temporal lobe. This is in terms for your mum. The temporal lobe are the kind of like structures in the brain. The hippocampus is a very, very important part of the temporal lobe. And it's really, really important for forming memories. Now, the hippocampus, and there's a lot of study in this with people who claim to have been abducted by aliens and lost time, etc. The hippocampus can actually be affected in some people with a lack of oxygen levels. There's also talk about how genes, if they mutate in the hippocampus, can somehow prevent the hippocampus from being able to do what it needs to do to process information and actually form memories at certain times, which means that people may suddenly find themselves sort of waking up and thinking, oh my god, where have I been? And maybe you've driven a car sometimes and you kind of zone out. I do this all the time. You kind of like zone out and like 10 miles down the road, you sort of like, oh my god, you've kind of been on autopilot and you don't really remember the last sort of few minutes. Either that or I've been falling asleep at the wheel and I've got lucky. And again, it's to do with the hippocampus not processing information and creating memory. So, there is scientific sort of research into how memories cannot be formed and how that can lead to people thinking that they're missing hours and hours of time. But you've obviously gone out and you say you've seen your mum on a bus, and the only thing I can think of is that you have seen your mum on the bus. And she's forgotten that she's been on the bus at that time, because it's been in this period of time where she's lost those hours, if you like. I can't explain why the bus driver wouldn't have seen her, unless it was somehow a reflection in the window of your mum from the bus. And that's very difficult for me to explain how the two would come together. But there certainly is some scientific research about lost memory. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, what I saw on the bus, obviously, I definitely saw something down the road as it's coming up the road. So it couldn't have been a reflection, because back then the way the buses were all set up, they had these ginormous windows in the front and the side, and you could see right in. You could see who was getting off the front of the bus. It wasn't like today's kind of buses; it was the olden type buses, and obviously what I saw in the window I was able to track that, see it out of the corner of my eye, then actually focus on it, and then watch as it drove past me and beyond. So what I was seeing was a physical thing waving at me. As for me more, I mean, if somebody goes and just has this hippocampus effect, let's say, where they zone out and they just disappear for a time or whatever, well, where would she have been for 9 hours? You know what I mean? You know, well, you know, what, you know, if she went in the shop when it was light and she came out, she remembered when it came out, it was dark, so she'd definitely been in the store for a substantial period of time, let's say at least a few hours. What was she doing in the store? Why was none of the store clerks, if she was zoning out, go up to her and say, "Hey, what are you doing, missus? Why are you just standing there like a zombie?" So, yeah, to me, I believe, well, I don't know even what I believe. I just know that after that, my mum got an insane thirst for knowledge. An insane thirst. And she actually went on within 2 months, she'd started night school. And she had no education at that time. But she went on to night school and she took GCSEs. She passed all the GCSEs with grade A's. She went on to night school again to take her A-levels. She took 4 A-levels and got 4 grade A-levels. And then when she completed them, she went on to university and she took 2 degrees at the same time and passed both criminology and law with 2 1s. So she got a double 2 degrees at the same time. So her, whatever happened, or I'm not going to say that they are linked, but up until that point, she'd always just been job to job, nothing special. Then after this event, whatever happened or whatever triggered something maybe at that time, set her on this thirst for bettering herself and realizing her potential, which was to be very clever.
To get 2 degrees at 2-1 at the same time, that is impressive. That is extremely impressive.
Even more so because she had to catch the bus to Lancaster from Blackpool. So she had to catch the bus in the morning. She'd have to leave at 5 o'clock in the morning, catch the 5:30 bus that would take them to Lancaster. Took about a 2-hour journey on the bus. Then she would have to do her actual coursework and what have you on paper because we didn't have a laptop. And back then they deducted marks because you were doing it on paper rather than doing it on typed up or anything like that. And she would do the work on the bus there and the work on the bus back. So she did all this and would often come home from university at like 8:30 at night, having left at 5:30 in the morning. So we didn't have transport back then, so it was all just done by bus. So yeah, she did incredibly well.
No, that is superb. One thing I will say for anyone listening to this afterwards who knows a lot about psychology, because obviously I'm not a psychologist, but I did sort of slip before. If I mentioned zoning out with the temporal lobe, I shouldn't have mentioned zoning out when I was talking about driving a car. You do still function and you are still behaving normally, but you're not processing the information in a way that's going to form memories from your actions. So when you're driving a car, when you say zone out, you are driving that car normally, you are functioning normally, but you're just not processing the information in a way that will form a memory. So I probably slipped up a little bit there before, but that's just in case any budding psychologists in the chat are watching. Maybe who's a famous psychologist?
I have no idea.
Whatever, whoever I mentioned before, it was Elizabeth Loftus, wasn't it? If Elizabeth Loftus is watching, then I hope I didn't let you down with that. But no, excellent story. Now, you have another story left.
I do.
But before we get to that, we were chatting before we went on air about a certain anti-Santa. What do you know about Krampus?
Well, only what you told me just before we went live. You said, "Have you heard of Krampus?" I said, "Who?" Krampus. I thought you said Grampus, actually, with a G. And then, no, you corrected me with a C. So Krampus, no, I'd never heard of it. But from what you've told me, apparently it's the anti-Santa, and he's a story or a myth from Germany, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, a Bavarian myth. The anti-Santa is a Christmas demon. He actually, originating from the German-speaking Alpine region, is a demonic character and is a crucial part of the holiday season. So much so that some families in that area have warning signs around the house all year long to keep Krampus from their homes. Because what Krampus will do is he'll monitor the children, and those who get on the bad list or those who've been naughty, he will come and leave a mark upon them. Now, the stories do vary depending on what region of Germany you go to. But one of the ideas is that on December the 5th, he will come to you, and if you have been naughty, he will mark you, either with a scratch, or some people say he might leave a bag of sticks at the bottom of your bed. But if you don't change your ways and start behaving by Christmas, when Christmas comes, it won't be Santa knocking at your door, it will be Krampus, and he will take you to the gates of hell. So, what do you think of that?
Well, well, to be honest, I mean, I think we could do with a Krampus here, to be honest. I would have loved that kind of story as a child. I mean, just the fact that Santa was, oh, if you're naughty or nice. It's not the same, though, is it, as Krampus? I mean, Krampus to me sounds more... I don't know. I just kind of like that better. I don't know why. I'm a bit sick like that, I think.
Well, the Krampus is a German word, so I don't know what the German word for Santa is. Maybe Krampus sounds a bit like the German word for Santa. Maybe there's some people who speak German in the chat that can help us out with that. I'm not quite sure, where that name has come from, but it's definitely not originated from England. So there you go. There's an excellent horror movie as well, made by Guillermo del Toro, about Krampus. That was a nice little watch, and he was a nasty guy. He's got a hoof for one foot and a hairy foot with claws on for the other foot. So there you go.
Sounds interesting.
Sounds almost unbelievable.
And let me just say, you did say that there is a movie on Netflix called Krampus, so I am going to watch that later.
There are two. There's one that's an out-and-out horror. There's one that's a little bit of a horror-ish film that is the easiest one to find. It's on Krampus. It's on Netflix. It was good. I watched it with the kids a couple of weeks ago because I like to, show them horror films when it comes out.
Well, when I was a kid, trust me, my father we used to be able to go around to the local shop, and it was like it would sell pies and all kinds of stuff, but it also had a little stand there, like a Blockbuster stand, and it would have all the latest movies that would come out on VHS. So it would always be the latest zombie movies. My mum loved that, and we would go up, and I think it was 50p at a time, and you would rent them for the evening, and you come home, watch them. And there was like Night of the Living Dead and all this kind of thing. I mean, we were like 5 years of age, and they would sit us down to these 18 movies where we watched people being torn apart limb from limb. The good old days.
Things have changed when we were kids, because I think it's fair to say that neither of us are in our 20s anymore. Well, I'm nearly in my 30s.
I'm 21 and a little blue one.
Yeah, it's things were different then. It was exciting on a night to look on the TV guide and circle what was going to be on. There was none of this streaming stuff, and it was nice as a family to sit down and watch a film, to put that video in the machine and we used to do that all the time. And horror film was always our genre of choice. Let's get a good horror on. It was great. But
I've got a story. It's funny, this one. So I've not told you this. So my. If my mum was working, she would be back in the day silver service waitress, so she'd be working of an evening in the restaurant, and my father would obviously be at home, looking after us, make sure that we watched a good movie with him, which was generally a horror movie. So being the age of like 5 or 6, he would set us down to watch these movies, and at some point during the evening, it would get to the point where we needed to go to the toilet, we needed to have a pee. And every time we did this, every time we went upstairs on our own to go to the toilet, my dad thought it would be hilarious to switch the light off from downstairs and bang the living room door shouting ghosties. Right? But the noise the door made, because it was like a hollow door, so him banging that, turning the light off, and us just watching the movie and him shouting ghosties, I mean, we used to come down terrified. So this went on for several months, and then one time, my dad decided to go to the loo, and we decided to pay him back, and he didn't like that very much. I mean, when we did that, we turned the light off and we did the banging of the door and shouted ghosties. We kind of like were quite amused with ourselves and paying him back. But he came down all calm as you like, like no problem, it's no problem. And then he went bananas on us. But he never did it again. He never did it again. So payback was a bitch.
Brilliant. Now, like, the only prank that I ever really remember playing on my parents, it was nothing to do with spookiness or anything like that, but it was funny. We had some finches as a kid in a cage, and one day I was eating a bag of mini eggs, the chocolate mini eggs that you get, and there were a couple of them that were speckled and white, and they looked like real eggs. Far too big to come out the finch, but still, I thought, whatever. So I popped a couple in the bottom of the cage where the birds are when I was young, and when my mum was cleaning the cage out, she thought they'd laid eggs, and she built a little nest for these mini eggs, put these mini eggs on them, and tried to hatch a couple of chocolate mini eggs for about 2 weeks until I broke down and told her.
God, I don't know. Kids say.
Fantastic.
I remember we'd have sugar butties for kids, and when we were younger, sugar butties, and
yeah, that was the thing, wasn't it?
Ketchup butties. Yeah, back in the day when food used to be expensive. Right. Anyway.
Yeah, let's crack on.
Let's crack on. I've got
one more story from you, haven't we? And then we've got a story each from Reddit.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So my next story is going to be something that happened to me pretty recently. Actually, I would say it was about 3.5 years ago. So I had been with my ex-partner, and I was on and off smoking. I've on and off smoked for years, more off than on. But this particular time, I was actually smoking, and I recalled. Well, what had happened was the first encounter happened the night before. So the night before, I'm in the bedroom, not smoking in the house, obviously, but just in the bedroom, and I saw these lights in the distance. Hang on, let me start again. No, I'd been outside having a cigarette, and I'd seen these lights in the distance, and then I came in the house afterwards and went upstairs, got the P900 out and tried to focus on them. Couldn't film for whatever reason, it just wouldn't film. It would zoom in, but it wouldn't focus every time I tried to start recording. So I'm seeing these whirly lights on these two craft. They were saucer shape in the distance. They were a good way away. I would say they were at least 10 miles away. And the lights were just going around in symmetry on these rather large things that were a long way away. Now, could they have been a drone? Not unless they were big, because the fact that you could see something that was at least 10 miles away says that they had to be of somewhat of a substantial size. And I definitely saw these things, and I called my ex-girlfriend up at the time. She came upstairs, and we both saw these things for about, I would say, 15 minutes. And they stayed in unison together. They didn't move, they just hovered in this one place. And then we watched them as they just slowly moved away, and then they sped up and got faster and faster away and moved away in unison until they disappeared. They just were gone, I'd say, within 40 or 50 seconds, they were just gone. So from seeing them for a length of time to just going, and you could even see them with your naked eye. So that shows what sort of size they were. But then the following evening, I was outside, again, having a cigarette, and it was kind of low-lying cloud. Now, sometimes you get cloud that comes down quite high, sometimes it's a lot lower, and unless you're actually outside quite a lot, you won't know what I mean. But the cloud to me seemed it was only like 500 feet above me. And it was quite thick, the cloud was everywhere, apart from directly above me, where there was a gap in the clouds. And I'm out there having a cigarette, and something caught my eye instantly. So it moved, something from one side of this cloud poked out, and I immediately looked straight up at it. And what I saw was this craft. It was silent, there was no noise from it, and it was more like a triangle shape this time, with a triangle kind of back on it, because when it went from one side of the cloud to the other, I could see the back of it. But it was triangle shaped at the front, triangle shaped at the back, where it had these kind of like colourful thrusters, and it had 3 thrusters underneath the triangle parts of it. Anyway, so it went from one side of the cloud to the other. My guesstimation was it was probably about 35 or 40 feet in length, so it was quite a big substantial thing, and I would have heard it if it had been some kind of craft that we knew about. But this thing, which was really low down, low-lying cloud, maybe 500 feet above me, went from one cloud to the other. It took about 7 or 8 seconds to go from this one cloud into the next cloud and disappear. And of course, I ran in immediately, and the first thing I decided to do was start drawing it. So I started to draw it, and I'm sketching it, and I told my missus what had happened, and I'm drawing it down, and I'm remembering. I can still recall it now, and that's my story. That is my story.
Now, you see, this is an odd one, and I know we chatted about this off air briefly. It's an odd one for me because I would love to see a UFO, and I would love to imagine that there were aliens piloting that UFO. And to me, the physics behind that isn't impossible. So I'm never going to say what you saw wasn't a UFO. It wasn't something piloted by other beings, etc. Because to me, the physics of that, however unlikely, however slim the chances are, it is possible, and I'd really love to see it. However, I've got a story of my own, and I know I've mentioned this a few times on my other social media channels, but I live in an area where they tested the stealth bomber for years and years, and we became an area which was known as having more UFO sightings where we lived than anywhere else in Europe. We were like the European UFO hotspot, and the reason for that was people were seeing the stealth bomber, which looked like no other craft that had been made before, and they were reporting it as UFO sightings. And as an adult, I've been lucky enough to speak to someone in the area who actually worked at one of the local observatories, and he had military connections. I can't quite remember at the time, but he was saying that when he was working in the observatory, he was urged or asked, if you like, by the military in the area to not poo-poo the UFO ideas, because they wanted the UFO idea to be out there so people wouldn't be asking questions about the test. It was almost like they were trying to create a cover story for testing this craft. Almost make people think, oh, it's just a UFO and it's not real, for example. So, I have no idea what you've seen. It could be something new that we haven't seen yet, that's not been made public, that was made by humans, and that's probably the most likely explanation. But it could be something from somewhere else. The laws of physics don't say that's impossible, and I'd love to think it is.
Well, yeah, I mean, here's the thing. So obviously, I'm not averse to the idea of craft visiting our airspace, because obviously I believe that there are extraterrestrials. And for anybody that knows that, they will understand what I mean by saying extraterrestrial. But the simple fact was, I was of an age where my mind was definitely not making this up, and there was no noise from this craft, and I saw it for a length of time, and it was something I'd never seen before, and it was relatively close. And if it had been in any kind of drone or any kind of helicopter or anything like that, I would certainly have heard it, and I would have known immediately what it was. But I wasn't drunk. I wasn't in any way, shape or form on any kind of narcotics or anything like that. So my mind is very clear about what I saw, and it was enough for me to immediately want to draw this down and sketch it. And as I say, I can still see it in my head. So for me, I know that I definitely saw something that I have never seen before, and probably unlikely to see again. And I don't believe we have the technology to do what that thing did, because it didn't travel it wasn't going at any kind of speed. It was only, I'd be guessing at maybe 40 miles an hour. That's just a complete guess. I have no idea if that's sort of the case, but it certainly wasn't traveling at any kind of supersonic hyperspeed or anything like that. It went over me, almost directly above me, from one cloud to the other, and it was just a silent move through the cloud. And then there was a gap, and then it went into the other cloud, and then it was gone.
See, I'd love to see. I'd love to have been there to see that with you, and I do love watching UFO footage on YouTube. And I know we've had a contact from somebody who wants to come on and show us some UFO footage, which will be absolutely brilliant. And like I say, I would love to think it was something extraterrestrial. I'd love it. I'd say there were multiple possibilities, but I would love to think that that was, one of them.
Okay, well, so there's my 4 stories out of the way, but I do believe you have, and I do, we have a couple of stories to talk through on Reddit. So I don't know whether you want to talk about that now, or do you want to talk about your story from Reddit first, or do you have another guess for me to do?
I've got another guess, but since it's the decider, just in case you get it wrong, I don't want you being depressed for the rest of the show. So should I leave that to the end? Do the Reddit stories now?
Yes, let's do that. Let's do that first, and then we'll get the final one out of the way later. Yeah, your Reddit first. Go ahead.
Okay, so my Reddit story, and again I got that written down somewhere, comes from a username by the name of John Peterson. Now, I don't think that's his real name, and I guess I should have asked before I said that, but that's his Reddit username. And I found him on a paranormal subreddit, and he had a story about shadow people. Now, are you familiar with shadow people?
Yeah, I mean, our first story was the shadow demon, so yeah.
Now, his story really stood out to me because it was very, very different to all the other shadow people stories that I'd seen. He claimed that when he was a child, when he went to sleep at night, he'd often be woken up and there'd be this shadow stood in the room, but the shadow had solidity to it. It didn't have the hat that everyone else claims. It didn't have the glowing red eyes. And it started off for the first few months where he would just see this shadow. And as I was reading that story, I thought about pareidolia. I thought about sleep hypnagogia. And I think I probably pronounced that wrong. But then he said, as the weeks went on, that would wake him up and he'd scream, and his mum would come in and turn the light on and show him that there was nothing in the room. I thought, well, that's fair enough. That's easily explained. And then he said that the ghost then would get a little bit braver. The shadow thing, it would get a little bit closer to the bed at night. It would sit down next to him for a few weeks, and again he'd scream. His mum would come in and see. He'd turn the light on. Nothing would be there, and then it started to speak to him. And just 1 or 2 sentences, like menacing things, like, I bet you're really scared right now, aren't you? Would be one. And, how scared are you going to be tomorrow knowing that I'm coming back tomorrow night? Those kind of sentences, which are a little bit freaky. And again, he'd scream and he'd shout, and his mum would come in, etc. And then he said he started seeing this thing during the day, just out the corner of his eye. So again, I was thinking, well, this is just, something out the corner of your eye, etc. Anyway, this is when he was a child. But the story really piqued my interest when he went to school, and he spoke to one of his friends at school. And he'd never told anybody really, other than his mum. And when he was at school and he was talking to somebody else, they were sat doing the work, and the child next to him just stopped, put his pen down, put his hand on the arm of this bloke, and looked at him and said, "Listen." He said, "Is it true that he visits you too?" And that's almost where the story ended. They had a conversation afterwards, and this shadow demon, or whatever might be called, in this story had claimed had been visiting both children. That's the claim, and the second one had been told, "Go and ask your friend tomorrow because I am real, because I've been seeing him too." So what do you think of that?
I think that's well, it's interesting when you've definitely got at least 2 people that can recall the same thing. This is why when I recall some of the stories when I was growing up, like for instance the man in the wardrobe. So my parents would hear me talking to somebody through the door. So my recollection is of talking to a lumberjack man. Their recollection is of me talking to somebody. So I definitely talked to something. So, that kind of, if nobody had heard me speaking to anybody, then it would be a different thing. Maybe it is a childhood imagination or what have you. So the fact that, more people can relate to the same thing, to me adds weight to their argument, adds weight to the story. And, well, who knows? There could be all kinds of things, extra dimensions or all sorts out there.
I think with that story for me, I kind of racked my brain and I was thinking along the lines of pareidolia and I'm going to keep pronouncing it wrong, sleep hypnagogia. Someone in the chat might correct me on that. Where you are kind of like semi-asleep, semi-awake, and it makes you hallucinate. But then the ending of that story, where the other child has mentioned something, kind of not necessarily rules those out, but it adds an extra little problem to solve. And the only thing I can think of, is that this child was having normal night visions. And because his mum knew, and often mums talk at the school gates, I'm wondering whether the mum has said to another mum, I'm a little bit worried about my son or whatever. At the minute, he's not getting much sleep. He's scared. He thinks he's seeing this ghost. And that mum might have gone home and told her husband, and the child has heard it, and then decided he was just going to play a prank on his friend and go and say, oh, I've been haunted too. So that's the only thing I can think of that would link them together. Yes, we are live, like Dio Designs UK.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, in that instance, you're quite right, actually. I hadn't actually thought of that, but that is true that maybe, it could have been some kind of prank where the other one had said that too. Some people are like that, I suppose, so...
Kids can be thinking they're being funny. They can be cruel, even unintentionally, to friends, can't they?
Yes. Now I have a story from Reddit. So I had been speaking to this this user around about a month ago, and I tried to get him to come on the show. But you'll find that with a lot of these people that they're happy to write the story down, but to actually verbalise it and come on the podcast was a little too much. So permission was given to, discuss this on the podcast. So what better time to do it now? Because I actually wanted this to be the very first story, because this is incredible. I'm gonna read it verbatim, because I don't think that me just telling you the story is good enough for listening to the story. So here we go. The username was u-silly _ AD4439. There we go. And it's called My Encounter with the Fairies. So here we go. Verbatim. Pin your ears back. Hi there. I'm new to posting on Reddit, so I apologise if my formatting isn't correct. Also, I'm not quite sure this would be a paranormal, as they weren't ghosts, but the experience did occur in this sort of outer-worldly way, and I don't know where else to go with this, as I've never seen anyone talk about experiencing something quite like this. I'm also sorry if my writing seems a little jumbled. I've never written this down before, and I'm shaking as I do it. I just want to get all of the details right. I just wanted to share this story and see if anyone had had a similar experience. I haven't really told any friends about this because I'm worried they'll think I'm insane. Anyway, I grew up in a sort of hectic household. My mother is wonderful. My father was incredibly abusive. That's sad. I have a sister who's 2 years older than me, and for most of our childhood, we would have had the same reoccurring dreams that involved us going to this fairy world. I'm in my 20s now and honestly don't remember a lot of the details, and looking back it seems totally insane. We would be having the same dreams, but at the same time, we didn't think anything of it. I do vividly remember how we would spend our days talking about all the things we did with the fairies the night before, and all the things we would do with when the fairies came to pick us up that night and take us to their world. This went on for a few years. Sometimes months would go by without any fairies, then we would have the same quote-unquote dream again, where they picked us up and brought us to their world. I know this sounds completely unbelievable, and honestly I didn't think about it for years. I have just chalked it up to childhood imagination, forgot about it and moved on with my life. Then I met a beautiful friend I'll refer to as TT. Is this extremely ethereal, non-binary person who is incredibly stunning and just has the warmest energy ever. They consider themselves clairvoyant and have given extremely accurate readings to some of our mutual friends. I've never been a skeptic really, but have always taken these sort of things with a grain of salt. T and I started hanging out a lot, but I never really talked about anything paranormal. We actually spent more time talking about our crushes and making jokes about reality TV. So I definitely never told them anything about the fairies. And at that point, I had never told anyone, and my sister and I had never talked about it since we were kids. Which is why I was so surprised when one night we were hanging out and they said literally out of nowhere, "So tell me about the fairies." I nearly fainted. I asked what they were talking about, and they said, "The ones who visited you and your sister, they're still watching you, you know." I immediately burst into tears and told them everything. Then I called my sister, and she started freaking out too. She said she had remembered everything about the fairies, and she couldn't believe it. I even called my mum, and she said that she remembered us talking about the fairies, and she always thought it was strange we would have the same dreams. Honestly, I know this sounds insane, but I swear on my life this is all true. I never thought fairies were real at all, but this has changed everything and has me questioning a lot, but I really don't know how to talk to anybody about it without them thinking I've lost my mind. It just seems too coincidental that my sister and I would have had this shared experience, and then someone else would bring it up years later. I'm so confused. Has anyone had any similar fairy encounters or experiences? Any insight would be appreciated. And that is the story of the fairies.
Very interesting. I don't know what to make of that. It is curious to me when they said that they kind of had this experience as a child and then forgot about it until they met someone else to talk about it. To me, that kind of tells me how much they really believed in what had happened. If they truly believed what had happened, I don't think that would be something that you could just put out your mind and forget about for a period of time. That would be my only take on it. But yeah, interesting. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I have another story too, but along the similar lines. My grandma, when she was in Ireland, she would remember having stories when she was growing up with the fairies, and her mother. She said that her mother used to have arguments with the fairies because when she was washing the dishes, etc., and the water would go down the drain outside in the back, it would flood their home. So the fairies would argue with her mum about this, and my grandma recalls the stories of that time back in Ireland. So, I mean, whether or not that's true or not, I don't know. It sounds a little bit far-fetched, but, it maybe there is something with these fairies. I mean, the fact that these two siblings remember the same stories, and the mum also remembers them talking about this too, and the fact that they would say that how they would take them to a different world and they would experience these things, that they both recall the same dreams, etc. I mean, to me, that seems a little bit too coincidental for me. I would have to say that for me, at least, I would like to have further investigation in this. This is why I tried to get these on the show. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that. But yeah, I mean, this to me is it ticks a lot of boxes for something that would be an incredible experience, or an incredible story at least.
It would be lovely to get more investigation into that and have a podcast on that just on its own. What do you think?
I've tried. I tried so hard. I nearly had it, but then at the last minute it was like, I can't really do it. I can't do it. So maybe when I send them this link to this show and they listen back to how we've talked about this, maybe then they might feel confident about coming on, because I really want to hear this story from their mouths. I want the two guests to come on, even the mum as well at the same time, and tell us what they remember, because this to me was like this to me was my favourite Reddit story of the past month and a half.
Cool. So where are we at now? We've got another story from you, haven't we? Or are we done with those?
I think we're done with them. I think what we've got is just one more story from you, haven't we? A real or not real?
Yeah, real or not real story. So for those who didn't listen to the beginning of the show, I presented Ranty with some Christmas ghost stories. He had to decide whether I'd made them up or whether they were ghost stories that were actually documented in old newspapers and interviews, etc. And at the minute, we've had 4 and it's 2 apiece. So this is the decider. You're either going to have a good Christmas and be a champion, or you're not going to get it right and you're going to be a loser. What do you want to be?
Well, I want to be the winner, obviously, so I better get this one right.
Okay, so this ghost story I have called, it is called, I haven't called it, it is called The Angels of Mons. I'm hoping you've not heard of it. One of the most famous ghost stories from time in the trenches in World War One concerns a British retreat from Mons. The British were heavily outnumbered from the Germans, and they were suffering just enormous casualties, and they were forced to retreat on the 24th of December, Christmas Eve. However, during this retreat, when they were being shot down and just ripped apart, a remarkable thing is alleged to have happened, and several soldiers claim that some kind of ghostly apparition descended around them and actually somehow blocked the Germans from advancing. Now, this story gained so much leverage in the trenches that it actually found its way back to the UK, and I'm not sure exactly which national newspaper it was, but I've got the clip here. It does say that in a special, so this is from the national newspaper, in an address at a special service of intercession held at St George's Church in Bloomsbury, London, talk about things in connection with the war, the Reverend W. Moorhead Hope referred to this remarkable apparition, in which he is to have said, we have heard strange stories of angels being seen at Mons. Is it true or not? We don't know. All we can say is that this is in the highest degree probable. So, several soldiers claiming to see this ghostly apparition, soldiers swearing that it has saved their lives, and it being taken seriously enough to be in the paper and be reported by a vicar at a church. True or false? All on Christmas Eve.
I am going to say almost believable. Believable. Well, yeah, almost believable, so that's true. So, am I true?
See,
is it true?
I'm gonna let the crowd decide whether you get this one or not, because I think whatever you said, you could have got this right. The story itself, the only false bit about that story I'm told is the date. It wasn't a Christmas story. It was reported to have happened on the 24th of August. So that's a little bit harsh for me to say that it was false just because I've changed that.
I take victory then. The story itself, yes, absolutely. Yeah, you can't have a trick in it. It was 99% true, so yes.
So you get that. The Angels of Mons. Now, obviously, I have no idea. What I think during the war, propaganda and morale is such a big, important thing. You know, this story was reported. You know, that is the truth. This story was something that people talked about, and it's not something that I've made up. However, what I personally think has probably happened there is, you know, whatever somebody said or made up at the time, propaganda in the war and keeping people's morale was huge. And what better way to do that than by saying that you've got the spirit world or God or whatever on your side, and, you know, our troops are being protected because we're right and the enemy are wrong, that kind of thing. So, you know, I think it's a great little exercise in propaganda. Would be my explanation to it. I don't know what you think. Your explanation, you know, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, do I think it was a true story? Maybe it was fog that came down, and they actually just thought it was an angel, that they weren't able to see through the fog. It could have been something that descended, and they just, in their terror, decided to think it was an angel that had saved them, but really it was just the fog that had come down.
I definitely think that's possible. I definitely think that if it's been very timely fog, if it's been such a well-timed bit of coincidence that fog appears at that point and that's helped them get away, inevitably some people who are more religious, when they get back to safety, are going to be saying, oh, you know, that's almost like a miracle, isn't it, that fog came down then? And that kind of gets spun into, oh, God has sent this fog for us. This fog becomes spiritual, people talk about it, and then it's easy to see how the Chinese whispers and the propaganda train can jump on that, isn't it?
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be fog. I mean, I suppose it could have been any kind of artillery dust or whatever, you know, from the time. But I'm not saying that it didn't happen at all. It's just that for me, I can, because of the situation that it was in, because of the back in those days, I mean, we had a lot more fog back then. I remember when I was growing up, we had this one fog come down this one time, and you really couldn't even see your hand in front of your face from a couple of centimetres away. I mean, I went outside with a dog. We had a dog called Jeannie at the time, and I thought it would be fun to go out and play in the fog. But as soon as I left the house, I mean, I was instantly disorientated. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't see where my feet were going, couldn't see my hands in front of my face. The dog was just bounding off here, there, and everywhere. I have no idea where the dog went either. But yeah, I mean, that was some fog, I tell you. So as for saying, you know, back in the olden days, I say olden days, back in those times, I think there was a lot more fog and mist back then. So I mean, that's possible. And
yeah. And when it descends, when it's that thick, it descends quick, doesn't it?
Yes.
You know, you can get it can look almost like, my word, where on earth has this come from? It's yeah. I can perfectly see where that story's come from. So there we go. So you're the champion. You win.
I win.
You come from 2-0 down as well, Ranty.
I
almost had it sewn up.
I pulled it back so good. I mean, what can I say? I got in tune with it. After the first two, I just knew I had to bring the game, and yeah, I didn't really cheat the last story though.
No, you didn't.
I didn't Google it. I didn't Google it.
I believe it. No, you've done absolutely great there. So, I mean, well, there we go. I mean, what do the chat think of?
Yeah, well, that's our first live stream, essentially, Ghost Stories with Catz and Ranty, and we thought we'd do a Christmas Eve special just to, I don't know, just kind of keep you guys on your toes and let you know what kind of show we're putting together. See, we can work well together, Catz.
We can. That's it. We can, you know, I think this is a nice little forum, a nice little niche. We can definitely work together. We can definitely disagree. But, you know, the thing is, stories like this are entertaining. And whether you believe in them or not, and I think that's where we've got a good little hook here, is that whether you believe in these stories or not, they are just entertaining. And, you know, they're good fun to listen to. Everybody loves a good ghost story.
And you can hear them more often than not on Spotify, because that's where we release them prior to releasing them on YouTube. And we would really love it if you would go over and at least follow us on Spotify, or have a listen to some of our podcasts over there. It's the same name, Almost Unbelievable. Anyone would think that it's hard to forget that. Almost Unbelievable, but yes, find us on Spotify and listen to the early podcasts. And I suppose if you really don't want to use Spotify, then yeah, you can make do with YouTube, because we will release them here eventually, so they will come on here. But this is what we're trying to do. This is our little project for next year, and for me personally, I am really, really enjoying these, because getting people on and talking about these things, it's nice to know that there are other people out there that had similar stories to me when I was growing up, and to hear these, to me at least, it makes a lot of sense. To Catz at least, I think we still need to convince him. I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I hold out a lot of hope for the community to jump in here and try and convince him that these things are absolutely believable.
See, you're coming across those as maybe Marley, and you've just warned me that there are 3 spirits on the way tonight. And yeah, might wake up tomorrow morning a different person. We shall see. But it's been great, and thank you for everyone in the chat for commenting. Thank you to everybody in the chat for keeping on topic with what we are talking about, and perhaps not talking about other things we do on YouTube, which is great. You know, it's really great that you've stuck with that, and I've enjoyed it. Have a great Christmas, everybody. Watch out for Krampus taking you down to the gates of hell. Yep. Because that would be bad, wouldn't it? That would start Christmas off.
I'm going to watch a Krampus film later on today, for sure.
I'll send you a link to the trailer.
Awesome. Right, I think, yeah, that'll do. And listen, guys, have a great Christmas. We may be back on Christmas Eve, perhaps, or not Christmas Eve. We are doing Christmas Eve. Maybe New Year's Eve, who knows? If not, we will definitely be back in the new year with some more podcasts. We've already recorded a couple, just need a little bit of editing to put them out. And yeah, if you've got a story, email us at admin@almostunbelievable.com, and we will get back to you, and we'll arrange a time for you to come on and do a recording with us, and then we can just get your story out to the masses. And Yeah, that's one way of finding us. You can also emailing us. You can support us. If you really want to support us, you could support us on our Patreon. We have a Patreon. Again, it's almost unbelievable. Dead easy to find. And that'll do for now, guys. I think, yeah. Oh, no. We've got a Teespring as well. All these images that are going by in the distance, you can find our merch on there. Teespring. So just look up Almost Unbelievable 2. Maybe grab a cup of Catz. And you, who'd want a cup with Catz's face on?
A mug with my mug.
Yeah, a mug with your mug on. But hey, listen, whatever floats your boat, you never know. Stranger things have happened, mate. Stranger things have happened, right?
If we had a dartboard with my face on.
Don't tempt me. Do not tempt me to do that. Right, that's me, guys. Listen, Merry Christmas to everybody. Have a great New Year. Catz, do you want to round up?
Well, just back at you. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Hopefully we'll see you on New Year's Eve for another one of these. And everyone in the chat, thank you so much. Have a good Christmas. Well done.
I'll see you then.
Well done. I mean,
well done.
Happy New Year. Whatever. Bye.
Bye.